welcome to Talking Tropes.
The podcast where we give you just enough trope to hang yourself.
This is the podcast where we talk about cliches in TV writing, the types of things that you see in almost every show, but you maybe didn't think about as much about the history and the repercussions.
Yeah, we're going to give you names for all those things that you didn't even know there were names for them. I'm Hannah.
And I'm David.
And we're so excited to jump into our first episode.
That's right.
Which you can probably tell from the episode title, is about the will they, won't they trope. Will
they or
won't they?
I mean, that's the question.
Will they what, though, David? Will they what?
It's all about romantic tension, sexual tension, and trying to draw that out over the course of a TV sitcom.
Oh, yeah. And this is, I think, a big one.
It's a trope that's basically as old as storytelling itself, because any romance is going to have the tension.
Yeah,
it's the tension of whether they're going to actually end up together in the end. Is this a tragedy or a comedy?
Exactly, yes.
The thing about it being a comedy, if it is, a sitcom, it tends to fall into the same kind of patterns.
This is definitely a trope that is seen most often in comedies and like soap operas and things like that, right, where dramatic tension needs to be high and needs to be constantly changing, but at the same time maintaining a status quo,
exactly,
which is what will they, won't they, I think, is all about.
Right. So the thing that you'll notice if you look back at, the first TV is that most of the characters were already married. These were family style or marriage-based sitcoms. We're talking I Love Lucy, The Honeymooners,
yep,
Leave It to Beaver, these kind of shows. And then as we get more into the postmodern era of TV, people start to challenge those preconceptions.
The 60s and 70s.
Exactly. And the premium, the quintessential example of this is Cheers.
Right. So David and I are some nice 20-something millennials.
Sure.
For those folks at home. So we were not around when Cheers was airing the first time. And so I actually talked to my parents a little bit because they were around for these shows. Because I just wanted to double check to see if they remembered the will they, won't they trope popping up in any of the shows that they had sort of watched as kids growing up. And I know that Happy Days was a big sitcom staple of the 70s.
Of course.
So I asked about that. No, nothing.
There is sort of a romantic tension element with, Joni and Chachi and anyone that, the Fonz is hitting on. But it's not drawn out, and it's not the primary thing drawing you to the show.
I think the thing that about Cheers that sort of helped change a lot of sitcom television following it was the fact that the will they, won't they trope was used to create a sort of series through line. That it became slightly less episodic, that you had to know a little bit about what happened on previous episodes to be able to totally understand what was going on with these characters. And it certainly is not to the level of serialization that has occurred today. No. But I think as a basement floor for that, it's a really strong example.
Yeah, I mean, having a previously on segment on a show
which were hilarious, by the way.
Absolutely.
We watched a lot of Cheers for this episode.
We watched a lot of Cheers. They would do something different for all the previously ons.
Have a different character introduce it. Use a different media.
For one, they had the coach character do a literal play-by-play of the previous episode,
drawing on it like a sports announcer.
Really, I mean, Cheers as purely in terms of pure writing and innovation and trying to flip things on their head. I think Cheers is one of the really great progressive sitcoms that address cultural norms and try and talk about them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so if you talk about the conception of this show, it was, let's set it in a bar in New England. We're dealing with single people. We're dealing with lonely people. We're dealing with real people as comparatively to the sort of idealized people in sitcoms of the past. And the show is really built around this Sam and Diane dynamic.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's really the core of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought
Even though it only lasted for 5 seasons.
Well, you know why that is, though.
Yes,
because the actress who played Diane, Shelley Lang.
Yeah.
She left the show. She wasn't happy. She didn't enjoy working with the characters, but had an astounding chemistry with Ted Danson. It was really like just that magic spark that when you get 2 actors in a room and they really play off each other. You gotta look. Do you not agree?
I very much disagree.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. Maybe it's Ted Danson. I'm not into Ted Danson, so I don't get it. But like,
I mean, Ted Danson, by today's standards, is not the most attractive man.
Also, his toupee was so noticeable.
His toupee, very noticeable.
I pointed it out to my mother while we were watching an episode together, and she was like, "He's not wearing a toupee."
Oh, he
and
absolutely is.
Robin, he most certainly is.
He is wearing a hairpiece, and he has a jaw that is indescribable.
I will say the jaw is kind of amazing.
The jaw is good?
I would like it better without the hairpiece. It's just it's too square with both. I think that's what's going on.
You watch him in The Good Place now. I think he definitely looks better.
I absolutely agree, 100%.
In any case, not to talk about Ted Danson's looks too much.
His beautiful face.
But I think that the dynamic where you have this antagonistic but sexually tense relationship,
right?
Like that's clearly what audiences latched onto at the time, even if it's not as palatable to you today.
Yes, and I think it was good to watch that, and then because the other, I think, prime example that jumps into people's head when this trope is brought up is
Ross and
Rachel from Friends.
Which is trying so hard to emulate this Sam and Diane dynamic. It's very clear in the text. They reference Cheers in a few episodes.
It's interestingly reversed.
Reversed in what sense?
So in Cheers, where Diane is the not upper class, but
she's snooty, educated,
she's
elite.
The snooty, educated elitist.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna call him Ted now, but his name is Sam. Where Sam
he's low class.
He's low class. He's sporty. He's promiscuous. He's popular.
He's a real American.
He's the jock, But then you look at Ross and Rachel from Friends, and it's the opposite, where Rachel is the popular, flirty one who becomes working class, even though she has rich parents.
Okay.
And is sort of forced to deal with being
looked down upon.
Looked down upon, yeah, especially by Ross, who is very much this snobbish, elitist character.
Yeah, and I think what they miss in Friends is that I do think that in Cheers it is a more of a class dynamic than it is a battle of the sexes, sort of war of genders kind of thing. And in Friends, you really do feel like it's
all about the battle
it's all
of the
about
sexes.
Yeah, it's all about, well, I had a crush on you in high school and you were popular in high school and it's like a childlike dynamic. A youthful relationship rather than an adult conflict of class and education and politics.
I don't know. I disagree.
Okay.
I really think that I'm having a hard time deciding which couple I think is worse, because I don't think any of them are good.
No, I mean, they're certainly not the kind of couples that you would want to hang out with in real life, and they're definitely not healthy, either of them.
I definitely give Cheers the nod for, one, not having them get together while she was on the show, and then even in its finale, when they brought her back.
They could have, it would have been so easy for them to just have them ride off on that plane at the end. For those of you who haven't seen the episode, Diane leaves at the end of season 5 because of creative differences, saying that she's going to go finish her novel. She ends up going off and writing for film and winning awards and making a career for herself, but she still feels kind of lonely, and she still feels this kind of connection to Ted Danson's character Sam back at the bar, and so she returns sort of triumphantly, and they have their same kind of banter and competition, and then they decide, you know what? We really did have something special. Let's get married. Everyone tells them it's a terrible idea.
Because it is.
And then they get on a plane to go get married. And then they hear voices in their head in the form of the pilot speaking directly to them, telling them this is a terrible idea. You're just doing this because you're afraid of being alone. This is pointless.
Yeah.
You should just go back where you belong, either in the bar or in Hollywood.
Kudos to those writers.
They understand.
And also for letting characters at the end of a sitcom not have gotten together.
Well, because this is what I think is the primary difference between Cheers and Friends, is that when Cheers uses the will they won't they trope, it's as a criticism of the natural trajectory of TV characters to be married and stay married forever. And in Friends, it's just trying to copy Cheers.
Yes.
But missing out on the actual critique. And,
yeah.
And I think that's something that we're going to see as we explore a lot of these different tropes, is that we're going to see that they're attempting to subvert, but after the subversion
all art
goes through,
is theft.
Of course, yeah.
Like, it's all coming from somewhere.
Right. Every trope is a subversion of the previous trope or a copy of the previous trope. And so this trope in its origin is a subversion.
They're all meant to address whatever anxieties or trends are popular at the time.
And the big trend in this time was the women's liberation.
Yes.
Second wave, I would say.
Or, well, sort of, it was both a reaction to the social change of the 70s and the encroaching conservatism of the 80s.
Right.
And, like, that decade technology change becomes a big
Absolutely.
part. There's, like, a whole big scene where Sam gets a answering machine for the bar, and that, like, creates, like, a whole...
Oh, I wish I had a car phone.
Yeah,
man.
Like, all that.
I'd kill for a car phone.
And it ran for so long, it lasted over these decades.
Absolutely.
And I mean, same for Friends, too. You know, I watched an early episode the other night, and those 90s men's over jackets. Wow, everyone looked like a brick house.
The greasy hair and the,
all right, not to derail too much. But yeah, so I understand where Cheers, I think, is reacting to the sitcom trope of not necessarily talking so much about sex on TV and not necessarily really like, oh, boy and girl meet, they must be in love forever, or boy and girl, or just the girl of the week, boy of the week trend of like Happy Days, you know, where it's like Fonzie's always got a new girl, you know, like that sort of thing. So I agree that it's definitely reacting to that, but at the same time, I think it really does set the standard that we see for a very long time in traditional sitcoms after this, of these two people having mostly an antagonistic relationship, but either one of them likes the other person, or the, like...
I think what makes this one work is that they clearly both actually do like each other the whole time.
I didn't get that, though. I mostly saw, like, for me, it didn't seem like there was a lot of friendship. It wasn't really based off of friendship.
Well, I guess this is what I'm saying, is that it's not that they have a friendship that they're trying to insert sex into, which is what Friends feels like. I guess this is what I'm saying. It's they're using antagonism to hide their feelings of attraction, and they're really just professionals, they're coworkers.
Sure.
That's it.
I would agree with that.
That they aren't really friends.
And
they wouldn't remain friends after realizing that they're not meant for each other. There's just an intense sexual tension with no emotional connection on top. And I will agree with you. You know, like, it's not a real relationship.
Which I think leads them to act very childishly.
Of course.
Which is why I think I disagreed with your statement where you said that it's more about class and less about this childish "I want you" sort of thing.
Okay,
and to me,
it's just, you know, pulling someone's hair.
It's only because it is very much they are pulling each other's hair. You know, there's one early breakup scene in like season 2 or something where they each grab onto each other's noses and
won't
let go, and it's they always just want to one up each other, neither of them want to lose, neither of them want to be vulnerable, and that's what leads to all of the miscommunication and tension and drama and blah blah blah.
That is really the core of it, and I think
which is one of my least favorite tropes is miscommunication like that.
Right, but it wasn't miscommunication too often. It wasn't that one person would say something to the other person and they would misinterpret it. It was that they were really trying to get on each other's skin.
Well, they wanted the other person to admit it first, but they both also wanted to admit it, but they couldn't because there's pride in the way, which also is one of my least favorite things.
Male pride or just pride in general?
I mean, pride in general, but specifically it tends to be more of a male trope that's used in male characters rather than female characters.
Right. I guess the thing that makes it attractive to me, and I'm not trying to defend it entirely. Sure. Cheers is a show that really, because of the time that it's made, a lot of the jokes are built off of this kind of casual misogyny type of thing, on the idea that
but at the same time,
men are reacting negatively to just the fact that there are women in the room.
I kind of wanted to hate it for that reason, and the same reason I kind of wanted to dislike Carla. She's a side character played by Rhea Perlman, who's hilarious, and I can't not.
You can't hate her because she's so funny.
But I hate in the first episode. It seems like this Carla character and Diane's character are gonna kind of get along a little bit. At least that's what I got from the first episode.
Although, I guess you kind of think, as a writer, these characters are never going to be able to really get along. Because they come from such different worlds.
Yes.
That it's the same thing. Carla and
here's what I'll say,
Sam come from the same world.
Here's what I say. What I like about Cheers, and I think this is where you're right about the class thing, is that it makes everyone is right and everyone is wrong.
Yes. That was, I think, the staple of the 70s.
There's no good guys,
there's
no bad guys. Everyone's this tossed salad of peopleness.
So just to wrap it up with the Cheers conversation, you would say more or less that it's a relationship that's built on antagonism, so it's not meant to work.
Right.
It's critical of that, but it still is. But it doesn't ring as a.
It's only mildly critical of it.
Okay,
I think.
Right. And it does sort of entrench those ideas, which carries over into Friends. And there's a few other things that carry over into Friends as well, such as the idea of there's a character who is just sort of the placeholder for the actual romantic interest. So that's Frasier in this one, and he actually becomes a main character.
I would say, I think, is one of the few characters to actually ascend that trope or that pigeonholing.
So again, another sort of plus in the column for Cheers in that they don't sort of leave all those characters in the lurch. They do leave, however, Sam's little fling with a congresswoman at the end of season 4, where he can't commit to her because he still has feelings for Diane, and they sort of ruin each other's relationship. And the idea of ruining someone's relationship because you want to be with them is, I think, the biggest problem with this trope in general.
I think it's a big problem of romantic comedies in general. I think there was some humorous BuzzFeed article or something that was to all the nice guy couples, or not even just guys, all the nice significant others who get left at the altar, where's the dating app for those people?
What happens to those people? We'll call them the left behind.
The left behinds.
The will they, won't they be left behind?
Oh gosh, so sad.
And it is very sad, and that really carries over into Friends, where for some reason they tend to be women of color, which is a weird thing to me. It's you have Julie, who is from China, only in that they meet in China.
Okay.
And there's a funny bit where Rachel
is she
assumes
Chinese?
She's not.
Okay. See, I've only watched a couple episodes of Friends, so especially the early stuff, I'm a little shaky on.
So I'll fill you in on how Friends is terrible.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people have a very strong emotional connection to Friends. We all grew up on it, except me. And and it's tough to look at now from this perspective, because
I will say I once it went on Netflix, I went and I binged a lot of it, and I was a little bit shocked because I had always, all of my like most liberal friends like loved this show, and
because
I like
these
watching
are the
it
things
now.
we don't question.
But it's the sort of thing where I think if they watched it now and hadn't grown up with it,
if they had to write a paper on
they
it,
would be a lot more critical
exactly
of it, and maybe not even like it that much.
I think so too, and I recommend that anybody who's listening to this who loves Friends, you know, it's fine to love what you love and to also be critical of it.
Yeah.
But, you know, try and...
We're very critical of the things we love. It annoys the crap out of our families.
Very much so.
We'll come back from a movie, and they'll go, what'd you think? And then we'll let out, like...
We loved it!
We loved it! Here's everything that was wrong with it.
Better.
And they were like, wait, but did you like it? And we're like, of course! What do you think we're talking about it for?
So, you know, here's the key with these other characters, these will they, won't they be left behinds. You have Julie... who is an Asian American woman who shares all these same interests with Ross, and they really seem like they would do very well together, but she gets broken up with off screen.
Yeah, a lot of them I feel like are off-screen breakups. She gets
cheated on in that Ross kisses Rachel because they found out that they still have feelings for each other, and so what could be wrong with kissing someone that you love, except for that in the other room,
to someone else.
In the other room, there's somebody who you've been dating for months. And this is defended. We'll get into that in a second. But there's also Charlie, played by Aisha Tyler, who I love.
Yeah.
Who Ross immediately takes an interest in. She ends up going out with Joey. They end up cheating on each other. Joey cheats on Charlie with... Joey breaks up with Charlie. Dates Rachel. And Ross goes out with Charlie. I believe it's season 7 or 8.
Oh, wow.
It's very late on. It's after Joey has shown interest in Rachel. And they've sort of played with that ship for a little bit.
I ship it.
I think it's fine to do whatever shipping you're going to do, but I think they're both still terrible people. Because, you know, no matter how, like, Joey's very nice about it, he's very, like, ashamed of his feelings and how he's betraying Ross, which Ross would never do for anyone in a million years.
No, because Ross is the worst.
But,
I think people who love Friends all still agree that Ross is the worst.
Right, but it's still Joey sort of trying to just, like, edge in on this game and play the nice guy card. He accidentally proposes to Rachel in a pretty funny scene, but then doesn't do anything to change people's perceptions that he purposefully proposed to her.
Right.
There's a lot of just miscommunications, like you were saying, that
I
create these big problems.
Miscommunication is definitely a sitcom staple.
Of course.
Because
there's nothing wrong with that.
Because you need conflict, and miscommunication is a really easy way to make that conflict happen.
But a lot of things could have been avoided if they just locked their doors and didn't give each other the keys.
That's so true.
All of this could have been avoided.
The whole show
People walk in
happen.
at the exact wrong moment. And all of this stuff. So Charlie is black and Julie is Asian, and they are broken up with and disposed of like they're not worth anything to the show. Full of white 20 and 30 something. You know, it's
living in the
there's
most
something about these disposable characters that just really it irks me as a writer. Like, you have to write up to every character.
Sure, I think that's absolutely the most noble writing goal of them all, is to really flesh out each of your characters, even if they're only there for an episode.
Yeah, and you know, if you don't flesh them out, you don't need to know what their childhood is like, but they have to feel like real people, and you have to treat their desires
of motivations.
As real. Yes.
What is this girl's motivation for dating Ross? And what is her motivation as a whatever else she is? I don't know.
The only left behind that they actually deal with is Emily, Ross's British wife.
That's the one that he almost marries, right?
He does marry her, says the wrong name at the wedding, and then they don't see each other for months, and then they try and make it work, but Emily gives Ross an ultimatum. And this is another trope that's sort of baked within the will they, won't they, is the ultimatum. And
that happens a lot with Sam and Diane too.
And here's the thing: is that ultimatums do happen in real life. They are challenging. Yeah. They are not good. I think anybody knows that an ultimatum in a relationship, especially one dealing with you can't see this friend of yours anymore.
That's just controlling, I think.
It's considered controlling, and it creates a perfect justification for getting that love interest out of their life.
Sure.
And that's the cheap writing aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like, if you were to try and get them out of their life by actually creating a real problem in their relationship, I think that would be a much better goal rather than just saying, well, I don't like Rachel very much because you're in love with her.
Right.
And like, that's not a real conflict. It's just an excuse to get Emily out of the picture so that Rachel becomes the only option.
And I think also it goes back to wanting to keep that sitcom status quo.
Yes.
Which is, again, one of the main features of Will They, Won't They?
Of course.
Is that even if they do, they have to stop doing at some point.
Right.
And not because they need things to continue and they need to be able to build each episode off of this idea that these characters are in the same place that we left them last week, and that
precisely
that you don't need to have watched the whole season to pick up with Sam and Diane or pick up with Ross and Rachel at any episode.
Now, one of the things that's unique to Friends that Friends sort of introduced, it's more or less, is this idea of like the friend zone being a big part of the Will They, Won't They.
Didn't Friends coin the term?
I'm not sure about that. I'd have to double check, but it sounds right. It's the friend zone.
They coined the term.
That's in the one with the blackout, episode 7.
What season is that?
It's season 1.
Oh, wow.
It's right off the bat, because it's the core concept of this relationship is that
Poor
will they,
Ross
won't they,
because
he's stuck in the friend zone. He's just the nerdy older brother of the girl's best friend. That's it. Oh man, if only she saw me as a sexual prospect.
Right.
That and everything.
There's definitely, I will say this, I think there's definitely more of a sense of entitlement in Friends than there is in Cheers.
And it's encouraged by the friends. You'll see that in like episodes. You'll have them say something like, well, Ross has only been dating this Julie chick for a couple months. He's been in love with Rachel since high school.
Which is like, dude, get over it. Like, sorry.
I mean, for sure, high school crushes will last. They'll stick with you. They're, memories of the prime of your youth. But they're fictitious.
But, like...
They're born of an immaturity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the same people who can't get over high school that are still... in love with their high school
very
crushes,
much sometimes.
The people who haven't done a lot with their life since, but which is ridiculous. But that's the thing, is I think like Ross's character is just so fundamentally insecure, and the worst. He's just so annoying.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with Ross as a character.
In the same way that I don't understand what Sam and Diane see in each other, I don't understand
what anyone sees in Ross.
What people see in Ross.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, Ross, his nerdisms are not played as charming. They're played as, like, dead weight in the room.
Right.
They're everything he does is played as, like, why do your friends even like you?
Right, exactly. It's like, it doesn't seem like
why
they
does your sister
like him.
like you?
It doesn't seem like he likes them very much. Like,
no.
And it's very interesting, I think, living in a post coming of the nerd age.
Right.
Where Doctor Who is on TV.
Yeah.
Again.
When you have the nerd as the hero, almost as the
default.
Basic,
in the same in the same way that Jock used to be the default hero.
Exactly.
Nerd is now.
Right. Sam is a jock,
and
it's played for laughs that he's a jock. Ross is a nerd, and it's played for laughs that he's a nerd. But his nerdness it gives him permission to do awful things.
Which is, I think, a huge problem with, like, the whole Big Bang Theory.
Of course.
But we won't get into that.
We won't get into Big Bang Theory.
It's a topic for another podcast.
For sure.
But yeah, so yeah, I think I agree with you so far.
Yeah, in the beginning of the show, Ross is willing to tell complete strangers that he has dibs on Rachel.
So gross.
Joey is the one who brings up the friend zone, but he clearly, truly believes that he has missed his window, the missed your window kind of thing.
Yeah.
And just the idea that because it's based on a childhood crush, it has more weight because they've known each other longer. And it just doesn't ring true. Marrying your childhood best friend is not always a recipe for success.
Absolutely. Well, it's not even, they weren't even friends in childhood, though, is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
She hated him and ignored him in high school. And,
Right.
Yeah.
And, there's also this sort of idea of a relationship is worth more if you have to wait.
Right, waiting long enough will earn you someone else's affection.
Which to me has kind of an air of slut shaming and the idea of you shouldn't give it up too early, to me.
To me, it's less about that, and I think it just still goes back to that, male entitlement
that you'll get them
thing.
eventually.
Right, and, this is still a trope that pops up even in better shows.
For sure.
Where it's the guy will wait for you and work for you to earn your affection, but really it's just almost like wearing the girl down sort of thing.
And male entitlement also plays into big romantic displays of affection, big dramatic gestures. How can you say no when you propose to someone in front of their whole friend group and everything in a big dramatic way?
Yeah.
That's another really common thing. In Friends and onward on this list of shows.
Do you want to move a little onward?
Yeah, let's
any last points about Friends that we want to hit before we dive into more modern fare?
As far as Friends goes, I think that's just about it, except for there's a bald girl named Bonnie who is broken up with because she's bald.
Oh boy.
Strange show. Weird show.
All right. So I think the two biggest modern successors that pretty tidily fall into this Sam, Diane, Ross, Rachel, will they, won't they trope is The Office and How I Met Your Mother.
Of course. Yeah, so in How I Met Your Mother, that show is trying so hard to be friends.
All right, just a warning for everyone here.
Okay.
This is going to turn into the How I Met Your Mother hate cast for a hot
just
sec.
A little bit.
Just for a hot sec.
Just bear with us because, it can be a funny show.
I will say this. I binged the first 9 seasons in a week, and
it's very addictive.
I loved it. And it's so easy to just hit next on Netflix.
It's so easy to Marshall or
they're built to be
Robin
characters.
And it's easy to just sort of laugh at Barney and his tricks, his bag of tricks.
And in the same way as Friends, you can sort of acknowledge some of the more questionable stuff and just move past it because there's another joke coming.
And there's always that hook of we gotta find out who the mother is.
Exactly, you do want to know who the mother is.
Who is that?
Which is honestly, I think, probably one of the most genius
Except for it's totally not original. It's the Wonder Years. It's the same thing.
Do they do it
in the Wonder Years? They're talking to their children about their childhood. That's the framing device. Okay. I guess there's not the same thing of trying to figure out the mystery.
There's no mystery element to it.
You're absolutely
so
right.
I think introducing that mystery element is awesome. Of course, I think later it becomes a little bit of a crutch and to the show's detriment at time, but also that show ran for 11 seasons, something like that?
Only 9 actually.
9. Oh wow. Then I bring the first 7 seasons, not the first 9.
Well, just to fill you in on what happens in 8 and 9, you spend 2 seasons trying to get Barney and Robin to get married, and then in the last episode they get divorced, and Robin gets together with Ted.
5 minutes, yeah. So basically, it starts with a really great premise, but then in the same way that I think the way I would praise Cheers for having Sam and Diane not get together, and how it showed a lot of character growth over the course of a lot of seasons. That is my same criticism for How I Met Your Mother, in that they went with what was Endgame from episode 1, if only because it had been Endgame since episode 1 and completely ignored all of the character growth.
Exactly.
Alright, also for a hot second, I just want to talk about how for that last final season of How I Met Your Mother, where the whole season takes place on like the weekend where Barney and Robin are getting married. And like at this point I think we've seen the mother's face, but she and Ted haven't really met yet, so we're like so excited for them
she's interacting with all the other characters.
I've honestly forgotten her name, even though we learned her. Tracy. Wow. Bless you for remembering that.
Something.
Who cares? Yeah. It's clearly not the show.
Dead wife. Hello, my name is Dead Wife. I'm here to inspire character changes.
I just want to talk about that betrayal to your viewers, where you build up to an event for literally like 23 episodes or so, and then at the end of that event, in the span of 5 minutes, you dissolve the meaningfulness of anything that happened.
Exactly.
Like, that's some bad writing right there.
I mean,
and that's all I have to say.
Yeah, it's
also disposable love interest.
Disposable love interest for sure. Victoria in season 1 was a woman in a bake shop who moves to Germany, and
so many almost weddings. I think almost weddings is like a huge
and it's
thing.
not always Ted who breaks them off to go be with Robin, which is a positive. But it's always, you know, the thing, you know, Ross is always forgiven because he didn't get laid in high school. He was a nerd.
Right.
And Ted always gets a pass because he's a romantic.
And a nice
He believes in love at first sight. He believes in love.
Ted Moseby is also kind of the worst character.
See, this is the thing, is like, it's an interesting reduction, because you start to realize that believing that there's a soulmate out there for you, that there's just one person who's perfect for you, and that there's destiny and all of this thing, it can create the same problems as Barney, who just goes out and sleeps with people and doesn't care about them. Because Ted doesn't care about any of the women he sleeps with unless it ends with getting married and having kids.
Yeah.
So the other really problematic thing that I see in How I Met Your Mother and in Friends is this idea that the friends of the main character are so invested in whether or not a particular relationship succeeds or fails. In Friends, this comes out in the fact that you'll have whole episodes where the friends are just listening through the walls.
Oh,
Have you noticed this?
Yep.
Like, what is the deal with that? It's like they're sort of functioning as a commentary track.
I think it totally goes back to Sam and Diane and Cheers, because one of the first big fights that they have, they it's in Sam's office in the bar, and they open the door, and it's played as a joke, but like they're all like pressed up against the door and like in this beautiful comedy tableau.
I thought like sometimes in Cheers though you would have the joke be that no one cares. And that no one cares about how the relationship is going.
That's the same thing with Friends, too. You know, there's the famous Monica line, like...
Just don't steal my thunder.
Or, no, like, I love Ross. I can't stand Ross. I love... Right, they paired it. Like, they're all... I think every show is aware of what its audience sees.
And they have these characters to function in these episodes as audience stand-ins.
Yeah.
And so you have, in How I Met Your Mother, you have Lily, who is the audience stand-in for the shippers in the group, and she actively manipulates relationships so that they will break up and get back together. Now, this is kind of framed as a bad thing sometimes, but it's also framed as like, well, she knows best. She's the matriarch of the friend group.
Right.
And so she gets to decide what relationships live and what die.
Right.
And she's responsible for the initial Ted-Robin breakup and several other things. Yeah, it was like, you find out in season 4 retroactively that she was the one who like switched their cell phones so that she would accidentally pick up and realize that Ted was still going out with Victoria at the time, and there's cheating and there's lies, and Sure, like, she's probably right in that case that it's a fucked up, broken relationship.
There's cheating going on.
There is cheating going on.
End or resolve somehow.
She'll do other things. She'll hide rings. She'll hide different things and scheme. And it's really, like, I think, indicative of the audience investment in how these relationships turn out.
That, like, no holds barred.
Right, no holds barred.
Like, whatever it takes, murder, if it means that
the ends justify the means.
Exactly, very much that.
And, you know, this carries over into the idea that the audience really does expect two characters to get together if they were shown together at the beginning of the series. Right,
or even just shown to have a little bit of chemistry, which is what I think is the case in
30 Rock or All right, we're going on two different directions.
30 Rock, I think, plays with it. I think The Office is absolutely playing it straight.
30 Rock is I think, interesting because they lampshade the fact that the audience seems to want Liz and Jack to get together, who are based on the real-life relationship between Tina and Lauren Michaels, which would be disgusting. And no one wants that.
But I think it's hilarious. I think the show does a great job of it. Like, I never felt like they were shaming anyone about it. Not. But they were certainly, like, they were very aware of it, and they would make a lot of jokes about it, and there were a couple of moments where,
Kim Jong-il, for example, is one of the characters who says that he just wants Jack and Liz to get together. It was great on Friends. It was great on Cheers.
I just wanted to have it.
Just don't think too hard about it, writers. But we think too hard about everything because we're writers.
Yeah. Well, because that's what I think is so great about 30 Rock is it's a show about comedy written by writers who write comedy.
Yes.
Like, it's of course they're gonna take the, like, weirder route. Always.
And then you also have...
Because they can for the first time.
You also have Grizz telling Liz that, man, we really were the Sam and Diane of this place.
Right.
So everyone's a Sam and Diane relationship if you think about the world through that lens.
Well, also...
If they don't like each other, that's Sam and Diane. If they do like each other, that's Sam and Diane.
Right.
It's whatever you want
to see.
If
they break up and get back together a lot, Sam and Diane. If they've only dated once, it could still even be Sam and Diane.
Yeah, it's all will they, won't they. It's all Sam and Diane.
I can't remember exactly what moment it is, but there's some moment where, like, Liz is in Jack's office or something, and she says, Jack, have you ever thought about, like, you and I? And he just, like, dismisses her out of hand, like, Lemon, you're, like, 400 pounds too heavy. Like,
part of it is because they have that, if two characters have a repartee, you know, if they have chemistry, you think about them like, you know, Audrey Hepburn and Spencer Tracy and like those classic, you know, back and forth talking movies. Yeah. You think about it like His Girl Friday or whatever, which was the basis for the Sam and Diane dynamic, but it ends up carrying over into non-sexual relationships.
I think it's also a very straight person dynamic.
Yes.
Because I know that there's a lot of queer culture poking fun at straight culture is the particularly antagonistic relationship and how that's romanticized.
Yes. Why do we straight people so enjoy hating each other?
Right, like, you're about to get married and dudes are still like, oh, take my life, like,
take my wife,
yeah,
please.
Exactly, like there is just that weird antagonism, and I think shows like Cheers and Friends and How I Met Your Mother, to some extent with, like, Robin and Barney, more so than, like, Ted and other people, like, really push that you gotta have some antagonism in your relationship or else it's not really a relationship.
And you have to have passion.
Right.
Like, passion means fighting.
Exactly.
If you don't fight, that's a problem.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest changes for the better that I've seen in recent years on TV is the move away from that.
Yes.
Because I would say even in How I Met Your Mother, even though Ted is kind of deplorable, he is genuinely trying to make a connection with someone and, like, be their friend and care about them. And it's not like, I want to find a girl who I can argue with for the rest of my life. I want to find a girl who I can have a conversation with for the rest of my life. Which I think is a better direction. And I think...
And you do see that also in The Office.
Yes.
As we transition
sorry. So in The Office, I think it plays straight that 30 Rock trope of two people have this
they have a playful chemistry. They have
tension,
a friendship.
Playful tension. It's built off of a friendship.
Yes.
And that it's more that circumstance is keeping them apart. And
of course.
In The Office, it's the case of Pam is engaged. And
right. Or Angela gets engaged to somebody else.
Right.
And who else gets engaged? Everyone
gets engaged on that
Aaron,
show.
I think, gets engaged to Gabe, or at least they're in a committed relationship.
Yeah, it's another show where I think it just goes on for so long that, like, the writers needed stuff to happen. So, like, with Pam and Jim, who I think is what I think most people would think of first off.
It's the most recent prime example of this that people really latched onto.
And that people still kind of love.
There's so many memes of them. I'm just looking for someone who loves me like Jim.
Yeah, I'm looking for the Pam to my Jim.
I'm looking for the Jim to my Pam.
Yeah, whatever. God.
I'm looking for the Roy. The drunk asshole boyfriend.
Yeah. That's the other thing is when they have the person stay with someone who they're clearly so unhappy with just so that
for tension.
Just so that by the season finale they can break up with them just in time for sweeps week, you know.
Just in time for sweeps week.
Gotta have that big dramatic proposal.
Right.
But yeah, so like, and that's the other thing that I've noticed going back and like rewatching a lot of these things is that these big moments do tend to happen at mid-season finales or at like
of course
season finales and that sort of
thing. They're not stupid. They're doing this because they want people to keep watching.
Right, exactly.
You gotta stick around for the next season.
And they leave, big cliffhangers at the end of the season.
Right. Sam calls somebody to say, hey, you want to get married? You don't see who it is.
Jim and Pam kiss.
Until the next season.
But we don't know what happens.
What's
the fallout?
After that?
Yeah.
What's the fallout? There's always, Friends, every episode is the one after that, the one where the thing happened.
Yeah.
The one after Ross says Rachel.
Right.
The one after Ross tells Rachel.
Yeah.
All this stuff.
So I think, and then like there's a lot of contrivance obviously to keep them apart, which I think is another part of will they, won't they? But then in The Office, Jim and Pam do end up together, and they don't break up. They eventually do, and they get married. But then an interesting thing happens. By interesting, I mean very uninteresting things happen, which is called Jim and Pam's married relationship. It's so
many
boring.
Things don't happen.
No comedy at all in their married relationship. Yep. No tension or any sort of...
in the last season.
But they just make it so serious.
Yes.
Like, they go too hard on the, like, let's have a real problem happen.
Right. It's the problem then is that Jim wants to go leave his job and start up something in Philly. And there's a big problem with that.
And there's just uncomfortable marital tension. It's like, it's all of the flirt that seemed to propel their relationship seems gone, and that the loving and support that you actually need in a real relationship almost wasn't there, but they were trying to make comedy out of that, and it fell really flat. And that's when I think The Office, which always had other side relationships, really picked up and tried to make other will they, won't they relationships things with Dwight and Angela, and with Aaron and Andy versus Aaron and Gabe, and like all this other stuff.
And it's
speaking,
not that it's not that married comedy isn't and can't be funny. I mean, I Love Lucy is one of the funniest shows of all time. And
I think just to point at another show shot even in the same style as The Office, Parks and Rec.
Right.
I think Leslie and Ben's relationship, or
Ben, April and Andy,
like nothing of their relationship once they got married really changed. They were still
they're still the
funny,
same.
They still loved each other.
Because
they were still characters.
They're dealing with external problems.
Exactly.
Now. April and Andy will deal with some kind of problem
differently
in their real life,
and that's where the comedy
help
comes
each
from.
other to solve it.
Right.
Which is where all comedy comes from, is an external problem.
Right.
Not, hey, I'm just really feeling, my feelings are hurt, feeling this and that. They tend to come from external problems for the most part.
Yeah.
So you were going to make a point earlier and I interrupted.
I don't even know what point I was going to make.
Never mind. We'll move on.
Yeah. About Shoot, nope. Just give me a second. What were we talking about? It was something.
We were talking about Jim and Pam after they get married.
After they get married.
They lose all the passion. They lose all the spark. And then in other shows.
Oh, no. I remember what it was. Just as an aside, Karen, who is briefly an obstacle to Jim and Pam's relationship, played by Rashida Jones.
Great actress. Very funny actress. Did have some chemistry with Jim Halpert.
Yeah.
I forget his actor's name.
Yeah, John Krasinski.
John Krasinski.
There you go.
Did have some chemistry, but just tossed aside.
Yep, another just, like, fridged relationship. Tossed aside in service
Rashida
of
Jones. She later gets married and gets pregnant to somebody else, but she has a happy life.
Yeah.
In the different branch, but what could have been?
What could have been? Coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Yeah, you have I think The Office is at least a lot more progressive in terms of giving the female characters agency and other wants and desires.
And I think
Pam goes off to art school.
Yeah.
Angela wants to progress in society.
Boring.
It just tends to be kind of dull.
So boring.
and sort of paint by numbers, and that's really the issue.
It's because I think that relationship was really just built off of flirtation and not built off of substance.
Do you think, from a writer's perspective, what do you think is the cure to this? Is it to sort of, go the Parks and Rec route and have their relationship not change at all when they get married? Or is it to sort of, make sure that you flesh out the relationship before they get married?
Well, because I think that's why it doesn't change in Parks and Rec, is because we already know what these two characters look like in a relationship, and that getting married means that they've now committed to each other forever.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that, like...
It's that you need to have the characters work even when it's not...
About just them flirting with each other.
Flirting.
Yeah.
And so if Jim and Pam were actually that entertaining without the audience going, oh, I just wish they would get together.
Yeah. Like, their whole characters were almost built around... I think Pam's character in particular was a lot built around...
Right.
That flirtiness.
She was the desired object rather than a character in and of herself.
And when they tried to make her a character, I think they floundered there a little bit. I think they had some success.
Right.
But it was limited. Like, I'm having trouble besides, like, she liked art to really describe Pam and
she
what
was
she did.
Shy and liked art.
Yeah.
She was your self-insert.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it allowed anyone to sort of see themselves in that role.
Right. Which maybe that's, why it's effective. Yeah. Is because these people are blank slates.
For sure.
But then, obviously no one wants to see a blank slate marriage.
Right. And I mean, I feel like we could name like 100 other shows that use this trope.
Of course.
And use it pretty poorly.
Right.
Or use it in a way that...
In a cheap way.
In a classic way, in a way that I think it is often used, and why I tend to take umbrage with it as a trope, as just like a crutch. Here's something that will create tension and create a through line that we can have at mid-season breaks, and we can have at finales that's gonna, like, punch up the story and really... like, drive it home.
But that doesn't mean that there's no new ways to do the same thing.
Sure.
It has become an audience expectation in the same way that we now no longer expect a laugh track.
Right.
Sometimes we don't expect a will they, won't they to go a certain way. Our expectations change, the tropes change. So let's talk a little bit about what will they, won't they looks like today.
Yeah. Where should we start?
Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a good
All right,
place to start.
Guys, I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Guys, I'm very indifferent to Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Which I think is great. I think that's totally fine and fair.
I just think that it uses all of the same cliches that we've seen in a million other shows, and what it adds that's new is the sort of like cop drama, which we have already seen in every single procedural already. Now it's just relocalized into a sitcom. Right.
I don't know. I would disagree, and I think that they do. Like, I would say Brooklyn Nine-Nine is very trope aware as a show in general.
As you have to be in this day and age.
As you have to be in this day and age. Though not necessarily. I think there's lots of terrible...
Trope unaware shows. Right.
But so I think it's very aware of its tropes. And
okay.
I think sometimes that's to its benefit and sometimes it's to its detriment a little bit.
Okay.
I tend to err on the side that I think it's more beneficial to the show and funny for those reasons. I think Andy Samberg's character is very much from the beginning, you're supposed to think he's this, and from a lot of things he says and the way he acts, he's supposed to sort of be this like bro-y, like male lead cop, you know?
Yeah, well, I just think he's more like a guy. He's the guy who grew up on cop shows,
exactly,
and then wanted to become a cop.
Exactly.
So he himself is trope aware.
Yes.
But he's a goofy,
nice
nerd.
guy who makes mistakes, but is willing to learn from them. And
right.
I think he's very much an admirable character who I like a lot.
Yeah, he's very likable.
But
aren't they all?
Aren't they all?
At the beginning, but then they start to change.
But I think anytime he changes, it's only for the better. Like,
yeah, it tends to be, but he still falls into those same traps. He's still going after Amy. He's still, you know.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know,
right.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine, it's a cop show. It's a sitcom. It stars character Jake Peralta. Andy Samberg plays him.
Yep.
And the first episode introduces this bet that he has with fellow detective Amy Santiago. And the winner of the bet, if Jake wins, Amy has to go on a date with him. And if Amy wins, she gets his car, which she's going to, like, set on fire. And, like, the two of them are very much...
a little antagonistic competition?
Absolutely.
It's the same to me. To me, it's exactly the same.
It is. I would agree. And I actually went back, because it's been a while since I've watched the first season, because we're now on season 5.
That's
so
right.
It's like 5 years ago. I went back and I watched it, and I would agree that, especially the first season, very much plays these tropes pretty straight.
And this is the thing that you'll see in a lot of these shows. Like, we can't cover all of them here, but, just pick any standard sitcom that's on right now. At least for the first season, you'll have one will they, won't they. Whether it's, Superstore or, what was that show? Good News. Or, all these different sitcoms that are on right now, they'll, at least for the first season, they'll have some kind of love interest.
Right, because I think it's an easy hook that audiences understand. Romance is always popular.
Right, but how does Brooklyn Nine-Nine challenge? How does it
subvert? So I think once we get into season 2 is, well, actually, maybe even season 1. So the bet is actually resolved by the midpoint, which is probably in the arena of mid-season break.
Sure.
I don't remember exactly at this point. And so Jake ends up winning the bet, so Amy has to go on a date with him. And while they're on the date, another character, like, tells Jake, you're basically pulling her pigtails, like, you're being mean to Amy because you like her.
Right, but this is the kind of thing that, people would say, it's the just screw already trope.
Right.
That's been around since Cheers as well.
Exactly, yeah. So, again, nothing new there. They go on the date, and they end up having to do a little bit of cop work that is, their captain is like, oh, we need someone to go cover this heist, and has the two of them do it, and really they didn't super need them to do it, but
on your bet date.
But they have the date, and it goes really well, and they catch some bad guys, and woohoo! But at that point, Jake starts to realize that maybe he does have some feelings for Amy, and then.
The next, big major change is it's also while working a case, they go undercover as a couple. They are Johnny and Dora, right?
Okay.
That's the next big development. Yeah. I mean, there's other episodes in between. But the main thing is he realizes his feelings on this fake date, and then they go on another fake date as undercover cops. And then they both really realize that they're into each other.
Well, so there's some more classic will they, won't they in between there where Amy's dating someone else. But I will say this, there's not a lot of, like pining necessarily. It's more that, I mean, and like I think they do also genuinely respect each other.
Absolutely.
In a way that's pretty...
professional respect in this case is a big part of it because they are working, and it's the same thing with Parks and Rec, I would say, because they're working in a job where it is sort of a meritocracy kind of thing, where you want to see your coworkers succeed and stuff. It's not like The Office where it's like, oh, you're the best receptionist.
Right, exactly.
You're never going to have the best receptionist or the best paper salesman. So there's no real mutual respect there. It's just, I like you, you like me.
Right.
In this show, it's about, you're the best cop. No, you're the best cop. We're both the best cop together.
Yeah, together
Teamwork.
we make Ultra Cop.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think there's a genuine sense of friendship between the two of them, and that yes, they like will definitely rib each other and make jokes, but at the end of the day, they're both totally there for each other. They've got each other's back. They respect each other.
So it's not exactly a subversion. It's more just a modern take that doesn't have as many of the problematic elements that you see before.
Yes, which I think is very new. I think, especially for this trope. So
this is let's reframe this particular discussion of Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah.
This is probably the best
example.
Traditional standard will they won't they
yes
that we've seen on television.
But also
around.
I would say once they
that follows all the trappings of the trope without any of the more problematic aspects, and it's something to emulate if you're a writer and you're trying to pitch a pilot. You know, make sure that the characters have real respect for each other, that they have real chemistry, that if they are competitive in that Sam and Diane way, it's because they both really do want to be the best. It's not just because they're trying to one-up the other person.
Right, and it's not, they're never competitive about their relationship.
Absolutely.
Which I think
they're
is
competitive about
point.
External things.
Yes.
Their job, how many criminals they can catch,
yes.
how many, whether they follow the rules or not.
Right, and so, more hijinks happen. They finally get together. They kiss, but then they kiss at the end of one season, and we pick up with them at the beginning of the next season. And there's a new captain.
They don't spend a lot of time hiding their relationship in secrecy.
It literally comes out in that next episode. Like they at the beginning of the episode, they're like, let's not tell anyone and keep it light and casual. And then by the end of the episode, they were told, no, you idiots, this is not the relationship. You keep it casual.
Don't take it casual because you actually do
like each other.
Do it the right way. Do it the way that, we've been doing this.
And so I'd say a lot of season 3, which is where they actually get together, is them sort of feeling out this new relationship.
For sure.
But I think, all of their problems are external. It's Jake has a bed that I find very uncomfortable. So, let's deal with that. But, it's nothing. It's
and it's very episodic.
It's very episodic. But in the same way that, with Sam and Diane or Ross and Rachel, it'd be I just can't stand the way Rachel nags me. You're I can't stand the way Diane's so pompous. It's there's nothing about each other's personality, in that way that bothers the other person.
But I think that with the bed thing, it's a perfect example. The mattress is supposed to be emblematic of the differences between them, that Amy is straight-laced and neat.
Right.
And,
but they end up finding...
Jake is a slob who doesn't care about superficial things.
Yeah. I would say, though, that the show is really good at finding compromises that don't feel like one person is always right and the other person is always wrong.
That's fair.
And I think that it also does a really good job of having the... having that conflict where they ask you, really, what's more important to you, this bed or this person that you care about,
Of course.
And I think,
it addresses them on a more human level.
Exactly. Which, that's what I would say, is that this show treats their characters more like humans.
Sure.
In an actual relationship who want to actually be in a relationship. And I would just say, to
address my lukewarm reception of this show, which is just that, a lot of episodes feel like they've been done.
Sure.
And there's nothing super unique to me about the workplace interactions that I see. I do think that Amy and Jake are sort of a healthy version of Sam and Diane.
That's what I would say about this show in a lot of respects, is especially after season 2, because there's definitely some problematic elements to seasons 1 and 2. after season 2, I think it's just like a healthier version
yeah.
of a lot of sitcoms that have come before, and I still think the jokes are very funny.
And, you know, the over-closeness of Jake and Boyle is also played for that. You know, it's played for laughs that Boyle is so invested in their relationship as this, you know, audience surrogate.
Yeah.
Oh, man, you were born to be together.
Yeah.
When you first met, the very first moment that you met, I said... I hear wedding bells.
Yeah.
You know, but it's played for laughs that he's, you know, such a romantic and he's
I would say
crazy.
Boyle is probably the most problematic character of the whole show.
He's problematic, but I think it's very much lampshaded, and he's partly because Joe Lo Truglio is such a strange looking human.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like the audience doesn't have to see him as like the ideal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas they sort of do for a lot of other ones.
Yeah, so I think
But, you know, you have an episode where Jake is trying really hard to impress Santiago's father.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to do everything? And so, you know, it's aware of those tropes, but it doesn't really... It's very aware of those tropes. It doesn't really play with them too much.
Yeah. And, like... I think one that I would point to in season 4 that's, like, really emblematic of the relationship is when, like, Amy is trying to study for the sergeant's exam, and Jake is there helping her all the way.
Right.
But then she eventually confesses to him that the thing that made her nervous about taking it wasn't necessarily even the test itself, it was that it might change the relationship. And so, again, it's this sort of, like, external thing, but that is testing their relationship, but their respect for each other and their respect for each other's careers is also a huge important part of their relationship, and so it can only ever be a problem for one episode, and that
does make sense.
Yeah. I don't know.
You've convinced me. All right, this is it is sort of a shining example of, you know, health. Happiness,
healthy relationships.
It's something that maybe you could take the things that you see in this
and
apply them to your own life in a way that you definitely shouldn't with friends.
Right.
How I Met Your Mother. Cheers. Don't do it.
Yeah. And just like, and I'll even say, like, opposed to The Office, where they try to introduce these, like, real problems that couples have, but it always comes off as, like, too serious and, like, too real and not necessarily very funny. With Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the, like, problem itself might not be funny, but all the hijinks around that problem, I think they do a good job of making that really entertaining.
I think, dealing with when two characters are actually together can be the hardest part of writing a will they, won't they. It can be the hardest part of, you know, sustaining that type of writing. And I think that, you know, if you can look at a specific show that, you know, maybe, like, or a specific way that you could challenge that is maybe by playing with the idea of will they or won't they stay together, but then you sometimes run into the problem of them breaking up and getting back together or not.
Right.
But you will still see shows, you're starting to see shows now that are playing with will they or won't they get divorced if they're married.
Yeah.
And I think that is an interesting sort of take on the future of this trope and how, like, our attitudes towards relationships are changing. We no longer see marriage as the end-all, be-all. Mm-hmm. So you look at a show like Rick and Morty, which, you know, has its various problematic elements, especially in the fandom, but, you know, like...
What can you do?
What can you do? I still like the show just on a purely, you know, fun sci-fi cartoon comedic level. Very improvised. And I also like the idea that the relationship that it's focusing on, apart from Morty's young infatuation with this girl, where it's just often shown to be, you know, based on virtually nothing, and it's just a creepy little creeper kid. Yeah. Just, you know, pining after the hot chick from class. Yeah. But, you know, the real relationship that they're focusing on is a married couple who are always on the brink of getting divorced. Yeah. And I think that has that same tension will you get together? And it allows you to relive.
That, like, kinetic, or maybe it's not kinetic energy. It's the potential energy. That's what it is. It's that potential energy building to something, whether it is marriage or divorce.
Right.
almost
and then
doesn't
once
matter.
they're divorced, you know, getting back together possibly, or, you know, doing whatever you're going to do, but it has to feel like it's a real change for the characters is the only thing. And in this case, you know, I would say that, you know, Beth and Jerry are unhealthy as all hell, but a lot of marriages are, and a lot of marriages, they stay together for the kids, or they stay together for various other reasons, and, you know, sometimes marriages are things that you really have to work on, and that can be really toxic at the base, but you can try and fix those toxic elements.
Right, or maybe sometimes you should
Or sometimes
get
you
divorced.
can, and sometimes you get divorced. And that's, I think, the real key here is that if you try and draw from real life, you're always going to end up with something that's usable. But you do need to frame it correctly, and you need to frame it as what it is. It's either it's a toxic relationship or it's a healthy one. There is kind of a binary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, again, this trope is a big one. It's in everything. It's, I think, also one of the most parodied tropes probably out there. We talked about 30 Rock already, but It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yes,
like,
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia does, I think, a really great job of pointing out just how screwed up this trope can be in the form of the it's not a will they won't they at all. It's a they won't, and I'm so happy they won't relationship between Charlie and the waitress, which is, it's shown as a stalker-stalky relationship. That's it. That's all it is.
Also, like, the thing of It's Always Sunny is it's just, like, the worst
people.
Of garbage.
It's the dregs of humanity. And I really
I'm not saying the show is
garbage.
I'm saying the people are
garbage. The people on the show are garbage.
And, like, the show knows it.
It is one of my favorite shows. It's one of the funniest shows because it's not afraid to sort of, you know, question these things that we take for granted. So you see Charlie do all these things. He breaks into her house on a regular basis. You know, gives her, like, she apparently puts vitamins in her shampoo and, like, you know, kills rats in her apartment. Like, anything that he could do to, like, quote unquote help them. Like, you know.
But really, it's a huge invasion of space and privacy.
Of course, and like, the audience knows this, and you see that, like, you know, Dennis who is always the ladies' man, but actually the attempted rapist. Always. He has his system, the Dennis system, and Charlie is trying to use his system and ends up, you know, getting people stabbed by carnies.
Because it's a messed up system.
Because it's a messed
up person is just going to make it worse.
Of course. And I think that the key to it is that Charlie's character, at its core, is that he is a very childlike character.
Yes.
He has an infantile understanding of the world. And you can really see that. You can really see that in the episode The Gang Saves the Day from season 9. Where you see what Charlie's dream is of him being the hero of a story. And his dream is that he saves the love of his life from being shot by a convenience store robber. And she's so grateful to him that they get together and they live in a big up house. And they fly away on balloons.
No, she dies.
Right, she dies.
It's basically, it turns into Up.
It turns into Up. It becomes an animated
half Ratatouille, like all the rats like help them.
Right, all the rats help them.
If you haven't watched it, it's, what is it? Season 9, episode 6.
The Gang Saves the Day.
Go watch
Everyone gets their opportunity to show their heroic moment.
Charlie's last, I believe.
Yes, and Charlie gets to show that what he really sees the world as is just that a janitor and a waitress are compatible. And men and women are compatible.
And then they have babies and they look exactly like them.
And so they have to have babies that look exactly like them, but younger. And they do the same job, and they go to work, and then they all have babies, and there's just generation after generation, a very childlike view.
And then he flies off in the house.
Yes, and so when the waitress dies, he gets rewarded by being able to fly away in a house made of balloons. Because his whole understanding of romance comes from Disney
movies
and children's films and animated films. And that leads to really fucked up behavior in adulthood.
Ken.
It can. It doesn't have to.
I would not say that most people grow up to be the characters. But
if you are in that Arrested Development sort of state, not the show, but the actual psychological phenomenon, where you are stuck in your childhood, then you view relationships that way. And I think Ross and Rachel, they're stuck in high school. Yeah. And I think Sam and Diane, they're very Arrested Development type people. They are stuck in young childhood, pulling each other's hair and twisting their noses. It's all sort of baked into this childlike view of relationships.
I think similarly to the way that you love 30 Rock's subversion, like acknowledgement and then subversion of the will they won't they trope is the same. I love Community that way.
Community does a very good job with this, absolutely.
Only because I feel like we would be remiss to mention Rick and Morty and not Community.
Of course. Dan Harmon's true masterpiece, Community.
In my opinion.
I mean, love all of Dan Harmon's work. Love Monster House. Who gives a shit?
Community is my favorite piece of TV in all of existence.
Is really fantastic in that it is so trope aware.
It is.
But it doesn't come off as inhuman. There's a humanity to it.
All of these people are acting like humans at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah, except for in a somewhat fantastical world.
Exactly. I would say
real humans in a somewhat fantastical world of this school where crazy things could happen.
But in a way that feels true to both life and TV.
Exactly.
Because it's aware of what TV does, and it plays with what TV does and what it can do all the time, and like real-time fan reactions to that almost. There's one episode where the creator, Dan Harmon, had found a shipping video that someone made of, I think it was Jeff and Annie at the time.
That's right, yes.
Just online. Just found it on YouTube.
What he loves to do is bottle episodes that are all flashbacks, but like it's a clip show, because tons of shows have clip shows.
No, he doesn't. He only did one show where they did flashbacks.
The episode that we're talking about is something of human memory.
Is that when they did this?
Yes.
Okay.
He
does love bottle episodes, which I think is great.
Paradigms of Human Memory, Season 2, Episode 21.
Okay.
And it's a great episode. And it's a clip show, but all of the clips are from episodes that never happened.
Yes.
And one of the things that they're showing is, what about the Annie of it all? Yeah. What about the Annie of it all?
Sexual tension.
The stolen glances.
Yeah, because the main character, Jeff Winger, is this lawyer who has to go back to community college because he faked his degree. He's the classic con man type character.
Right.
Very much like an asshole who learns how to have a heart of gold, like that sort of thing. And the whole show is based off of the premise of Will They, Won't They, with him and this other character, Britta Perry.
Right.
And whether or not like he can get with her,
Right.
And there is a relationship that is purely based off of antagonism, and when they do get together, it's shown that it doesn't really work.
Right.
And so, he's in this whole study group with a whole bunch of misfits, and one of them is also this girl Annie, who's very buttoned up, like.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good contrast.
Yeah.
It's a Sam and Diane kind of contrast.
Right.
But it's different in that. It's
they don't
not
seem
so
to hate each other. Yeah.
There's not a lot of antagonism there, apart from in a couple of like brief episodes, like the election episode.
But I think that's all external conflict.
It is again. It's all external competition. At the end of the day, not competition of one another.
Right. But so this clip show, Dan Harmon found it on YouTube, realized it was a thing that people did, and then incorporated
shipping these characters, Jeff and Annie.
Right. Incorporated it, and basically just like these like supposedly like stolen glances moments, because he thought it was such an incredible thing that people could take the smallest moments and turn it into something meaningful.
Because he didn't give them a lot to work with.
Yeah, because he does it with Annie, but then they do it again with like Pierce and Abed, who are two other characters who have no chemistry.
You can look at any two characters and find a clip of them looking at each other with friendship or longing or love or whatever.
And put some Sarah McLachlan music over it.
If you put sad music over it, anything looks like a Will They, Won't They. And fans can really take any clip of any two characters interacting and turn into a Will They, Won't They. Anything.
They really can, yeah.
And they generally did. I mean, every young, attractive character on that show hooked up with one another.
Exactly.
Troy had a relationship with Annie in a Will They, Won't They sort of way. Jeff had a relationship with both Britta and Annie. And
Troy and Britta.
And Troy and Britta eventually
this is another one where they built up a beautiful will they... It wasn't even a will they won't they. It was just like there was chemistry building between the two of them. And they ruined it in season 4 when Dan Harmon wasn't there.
Yeah, Dan Harmon...
Topic for another time.
Dan Harmon left the show. And the show also left the show.
Yeah. All right. But will they, won't they?
Will they or won't they?
Will they or won't they?
And I think we can talk about the end of Community as a pretty interesting tidbit.
Yeah.
This was an ending that was actually conceived by Dan Harmon's ex-wife, Erin McGathy, who's also a very funny comedian.
Yes.
And she sort of compared the last scene of this show, which features Jeff talking to Annie and saying, you know, what do you really want? What is this? Where is this going? Because you could be leaving tomorrow. This show might not come back. In both in a metafictional sense and in the show itself. But you know, like what happens now? Should we kiss? Should we have like a passionate night together? And then she says, you know, maybe you should just give me, you know, a friendly kiss goodbye, so that you know you don't regret it. And Erin McGathy said that it's a lot like the movie Drop Dead Fred, which is about a young girl who grows up and then reconnects with her imaginary friend. And there's just at the end there's just a nice like loving kiss, but it's not a romantic kiss.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this is. And I think there's an understanding that you can have sexual feelings for a person, but they don't have to supersede the love of a friendship.
Right. And I think they don't, like, just because you want to bang someone doesn't mean you have to be in a relationship with them.
Right.
Like.
Exactly. It's
all. And oftentimes, like, if Tinder proves anything, it's that people just want to bang.
And that's the conclusion that we're about to come to is. Why don't we have a sitcom about Tinder?
No, thank you. I'm sure it's in production somewhere.
Tinder, the show.
Oh, God.
Oh, yes.
Wasn't there a show?
Called Tinder?
No, it wasn't.
Swipe
Tinder.
left for love.
It was like about Grindr or something. I could be wrong.
I'll die. I'll die of death. You've also got shows that are out right now. You've got plenty of shows that are out right now that are playing with this sort of dynamic. You've got The Good Place.
Tell us which shows you think are like...
Give us any examples that you can think of good shows for this trope, bad shows for this trope.
Yeah, what are your favorite examples, least favorite? Do you like this trope? Do you not like it?
Yeah, I mean, is this something that you look for when you pick up a new show, or is it something that's sort of incidental for you?
Right. I think... to sort of almost bring us full circle, the new show that Ted Danson is on, The Good Place,
it does play with this a lot.
It's especially in its second season, has really started to look more critically at a lot of sitcom tropes and specifically parody the cyclical nature of them. I don't want to say why it's doing more of this in the second season than the first season. I won't spoil it for you.
But suffice it to say that the status quo is a big issue in this show, and maintaining that status quo, but also always changing it.
Yes.
So there's a question always of, will any of these... Because there's really only 4 main human characters. Yeah. And
I'd say 6 main characters total.
How are they going to pair up, and what are they going to do? So there aren't a lot of pairings they can do. And will they even
pair off with the non-human characters?
Exactly.
And blah, blah, blah.
What are you going to do? And so, you know, like, even if you reduce this trope down to its very, very bare minimum of there's 4 people. Yeah. Any of them could hook up with any of them.
Also produces some really fun bottle episodes. Which,
of course,
which is a topic for another time, but
bottle episodes. We'll talk about that at some point. Certainly talk about a lot of Dan Harmon in that one. But The Good Place, you know, it's still very heteronormative.
Very heteronormative.
There's a lot of every character has a soulmate, but there's a lot of same-sex soulmates.
Gay teasing. But
and there's gay teasing, but not follow through. But I do think it is an interesting show just because it it's just the bare bones of the will they, won't they.
I would say
nothing.
It's probably the TV show, the only network TV show that's like actually pretty interesting to be watching right now. It's definitely
the one that I'm watching right now as far as network sitcoms. Yeah. There's definitely other ones to watch, but I just haven't gotten around to them.
Totally. I mean,
let us know any shows that you want that we should watch.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll talk about it.
Also, if you guys have any trope suggestions that you're super excited to hear us talk about, we'd love to talk about them.
Yep. Anything that's on TV Tropes is
totally
fair game. And thank you very much to TV Tropes for helping us with our research.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's a great resource. We're not affiliated with them.
We are not.
They don't know we exist.
It's just a great website.
It is. It really is. And maybe we'll talk about this more in the future. But for now, let's leave you with this. Will we or won't we end this episode right now?
We will.